Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 6th annual Let Peace Be Their Memorial wreath-laying ceremony at the Vancouver Unitarian Sanctuary. We gratefully and humbly acknowledge that we are gathering on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam Nation, lands taken by colonizing forces without an agreement with the First Peoples who lived here and who still live here, and whose traditional ways and resilience offer to us all deep wisdom for learning of stewardship and how to be in relationship with our land, these lands, and with all people, recognizing that we are one human family. Through this annual wreath ceremony and white lapel poppy campaign, the Vancouver Peace Poppies hopes to encourage Canadians to broaden our Remembrance Day focus, to include the civilians who now make up 90% of the victims of violent conflict around the world. We want to challenge the beliefs and the values and the institutions that make war seem inevitable. We want to urge our government to promote and fund effective and non-military means of dispute resolution. This is the purpose of the White Poppy campaign, and this is the reason we are gathering here today. I have some opening words to share with you, adapted from Tim O'Brien. He writes, "In the end, of course, a true war story is never about war. It's about sunlight. It's about the special way that dawn spreads out on a river when you know you must cross the river and march into the mountains and do things you are afraid to do. It is about love and memory. It's about sorrow. It's about people who never listen. My friends, today we gather here together, we join together to listen. Delighted to introduce our first musical performers for this afternoon. Madeline DeLittle and Jim Edmondson, who've been part of Let Peace Be Their Memorial since the inaugural ceremony in 2016. Thank you.
There's so many songs about peace. This one, everybody can relate to at this time of year. It's by the very late Mike Marker.
I'm off to rake the leaves again, like so many times before. I do my thinking best this way, I'll work in the out of doors, and each separate leaf is a long lost friend, lost in some long lost war. And I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. Our habits seem ingrained in us. We don't want to take the time to go it slow and just say no to the gadgets of this crazy time. New technology meets biology. Descartes' dream of a machine for war. And I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. Each leaves a lesson yet unlearned, a story to be restored. The native people of this land knew all that we know and more. They knew the truth, life's a mystery, and killing cannot stop war. And I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. The clouds are moving swiftly now, they're bringing a time of rain to wash the dusty atmosphere, for the sky sings an old refrain. Mother Earth requires a blanket and they make their bed on the floor. And I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more. I say a prayer for the changing sky and a season of peace once more.
The first poem this morning is from Philip Appelman. It's called The Persistence of Memory. Philip Appelman was a respected American poet and academic, and he was born in 1926. He lived through several major wars before dying just last year in 2020. And this poem is from the new book, New and Selected Poems, 1956 to 1996. The Persistence of Memory. We have been through them now. The silver anniversaries, VE Day, the bomb, the wreck of Japan, all misted in quaintness. And still, they keep coming. Brown women swirling past, the armies somewhere behind them, burning the villages. Always the same weary women each year. Muddy skeletons lugging the brass pots, tugging the delicate children, camping in culverts, eating grass. And the rich bombers run on their shabby targets. Kids in helmets inch through torn jungles. Somewhere at sea, ships lob shells at the horizon. It is all a memory of old men. The brave planes limping home, balding heroes sending their sons to glory. The bleeding always the same, like father, like son. Breastplate and buckler rusting in a dream of blood we move through. Open-eyed, sons of our dreaming, waiting for all the memories to fade This next poem is by Siegfried Sassoon. It's called Unpassing the New Menin Gate. Sassoon was an English war poet, a writer, and soldier. Decorated for bravery on the Western Front, and he became one of the leading poets of the First World War. His poetry both described the horrors of the trenches and also satirized the patriotic pretensions of those he felt were responsible for a jingoism-fueled war. Unlike many other World War I poets, Sassoon survived the war and died in 1967 at age 81. The Menin Gate Memorial to the missing in Ypres, Belgium, is dedicated to British and Commonwealth soldiers who were killed in the Ypres salient of World War I. These graves are unmarked and unknown. The gate was unveiled on the 24th of July in 1927. Unpassing the new Menin Gate. Who will remember passing through this gate? The unheroic dead who fed the guns? Who shall absolve the foulness of their fate? Those doomed, conscripted, unvictorious ones. Crudely renewed, the salient holds its own. Paid are its dim defenders by this pomp. Paid with a pile of peace-complacent stone. The armies who endured that sullen swamp. Here was the world's worst wound, and here with pride, their name liveth forever, the gateway claims. Was ever an immolation so belied as these intolerably nameless names? Well might the dead who struggled in the slime rise and deride this sepulchre of crime. We have next in our program a hearing from singer-songwriter Linda Allen, who couldn't be with us today in person but has created a special video performance for today's ceremony. And after this video, you will hear from our organizer and hostess Teresa Gagne, co-founder of Vancouver Peace Poppies and artistic director of this event. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Allen, and I'm from Bellingham, Washington, just south of the border. And I am so honored to be part of this event, honoring those who have not been acknowledged on this day of remembrance, not by our governments, who may not particularly want to acknowledge the incredible losses due to war and its high cost. So I'm going to sing 3 songs for you. And the first one acknowledges those activists who work so hard to work for peace, to stand in the way of what our governments may be wanting to do at a tremendous cost. They're imprisoned and sometimes they're killed. And that was the case for a 23-year-old woman from Olympia named Rachel Corrie. and that was back in 2003. She was in Gaza and stood between a home that was set to be demolished and an Israeli Defense Forces armored bulldozer that crushed her as she stood there and trying to prevent this. And because just recently it was announced there are even more settlements being built in Palestinian territory, it seemed a good time to remember her story again. So this is a song for Rachel. Rachel laid her body down. Rachel laid her body down. For the love of peace and justice, Rachel Corrie stood her ground. Rachel laid her body down. Young girl in a refugee camp stood before a home, trying to stop a bulldozer with human flesh and bone. She died beneath the grinding wheels of hatred and of fear. You are present, Rachel Corrie. We are singing through our tears. Rachel laid her body down. Rachel laid her body down. For the love of peace and justice, Rachel Corrie stood her ground. Rachel laid her body down. A young man stood in silence. The camera caught him there, holding back the tanks that were headed to Tiananmen Square. I never knew what happened to that man so far away. But when I think of courage, I still think of him today. And how he laid his body down. How he laid his body down. For the love of peace and justice, that young man stood his ground. He laid his body down. Some stand before a logging truck, knee deep in rain and mud. Some try to stop a bomber with a hammer and their blood. Love takes a stand in human bodies, heart and head and hands. Machines of war and greed will rust and crumble in the sand. They have laid their bodies down. They have laid their bodies down. For the love of peace and justice, there are those who've stood their ground. They have laid their bodies down. Rachel laid her body down.
So I just wanted to say a few words about my friend Linda Allen. Linda Allen has worked as a professional songwriter, folk musician, song collector, and oral historian for many decades in Washington State. And Denis and I have known her for much of that time. She's compiled 4 songbook collections, produced 10 original albums, founded 2 choirs, and presented many workshops. She's a wonderful singer and an amazing songwriter, but an unfamiliar name to most Canadians. I've always hoped to have a chance to include her music in our ceremony, and this online event seemed like a perfect opportunity. I'm so pleased she said yes to my request. If you like what you hear today, please check her website's lindasongs.com. So next, I'm going to say a few words about the history of the white poppy and Vancouver Peace Poppies and this ceremony. So the white poppy, as a lot of you probably know, was an idea that first emerged in Britain in the early 1930s. After the horror of the First World War, many people, especially women, were concerned at what they saw was a rising appetite for militarism and a feeling that the lessons of not very many years ago of the horrors of war and the promise of never again were being lost. So they came up with the white poppy as a symbol of saying no to war. And the white poppy has been distributed in Britain, as far as I know, fairly continuously since the 1930s by the Peace Pledge Union. And that's where we get our white poppies from. We import them from Britain. And so when people ask where the money goes for the poppies, a lot of the money goes to about $1 of the donation money we get per poppy goes to the Peace Pledge Union in Britain to pay for the cost of manufacturing the beautiful fabric poppies and also to support the wonderful peace education work that they do. And their website I really recommend. It's linked from our peacepoppies.ca website. So Vancouver Peace Poppies, Denis and I started it in 2009 with about 50 handmade poppies. We'd been wearing at that time white poppies for a number of years, and we had found that they seemed to evoke a lot of interesting questions. People were curious. They weren't hostile, but they were interested about where the white poppies came from, what they stood for. And we thought that it would be a great idea if they could be more widely available. We had been introduced to them by women of the WILF, the Women's Institute for, oh my goodness, my brain's gone blank. Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Thank you, Denis. And that's where we got our first poppies from. So anyway, in 2009, we decided we would order some poppies from Britain, and that was our first campaign. Our first schools campaign was in 2012, a few years later. And at that time, that's when these two beautiful mixed poppy wreaths that you see on either side of the podium today were made by the children at one of the downtown East Side schools, colored and cut out all these beautiful poppies to make wreaths highlighting the changing statistics from World War I, when the civilian victims of war were, I think, about 20%, to now when they're estimated to be 90%. So we just thought it's a nice visual reminder of how things have changed. And I think that highlights one of the reasons that we feel that it's so important to do, as Lara said, to broaden the focus of Remembrance Day to include all the victims of war. In pre-pandemic, in 2019, we had our most successful year ever with 6,000 white poppies distributed across Canada, of which 1,600 went to schools. This year and last, depot sales and mail orders were down, as we expected, but this year our schools campaign has skyrocketed to a total of 3,100 poppies in 18 different schools. So that was a very exciting change for us. We feel that the schools campaign is a really important part of what we do, because reaching children who are really open to the ideas and giving them an option on Remembrance Day. In BC and in many other provinces, I think, the Remembrance Day assembly is the single required assembly that all schools must have in the year. The Legion provides schools with red poppies for free, so it's very easy for that message to be incorporated into classroom learning. And so we felt that it was important to make other options available. So on our website, we've prepared resource material for elementary and secondary school students, ideas of the ways that poppies can be used, and printed materials that teachers can use. And we provide subsidized lapel poppies at a suggested donation of 60 cents a poppy, rather than the about $1.25 that the poppies cost us. We feel that this is really important because in many cases, the money for these poppies is coming from teachers' own pockets, or it's coming from very limited classroom resources. So we do feel that keeping the price down as low as possible is really important. And as the school campaign popularity increases, of course, the challenge is going to become funding it. So if anybody has any great ideas of grants we could apply for, or other ways that we could do some fundraising to keep making poppies available. So far, we haven't turned away any schools that have requested them, but if the demand keeps off at this level, it certainly will be very challenging for us, because we don't distribute poppies as a fundraiser. Our goal has always been just to break even, and that was pretty easy to do in the years when the main campaign was distributing maybe 3 times as many poppies as the schools campaign, but will certainly grow more challenging. So just give it some thought if you have any ideas. So it's, what else was I going to say? So this year, our main campaign has done really well, much better. We've mailed orders, almost 60 orders, but the number of poppies is down to only about 1,000 poppies over the higher of 5,000 that we had before the pandemic. And we've also lost a couple of our key depots, and we'd like to get more depots for next year, partly because it's a great way to get poppies out to people who just want 1 or 2, and it's just a good way to get the word out. So if any of you have ideas, we have a few areas where we've been pretty good. Commercial Drive, we've had depots since our very first year, 2009. Kitsilano, but we'd really like to get into some of the suburban communities, particularly cafes or groceries or businesses that are close to a transit hub, so it's easy for people to pick up poppies. So again, if you can just kind of think about that, and if there's a business that you deal with that you think might be willing, we can contact us, we can send you some information. And the best thing is if you can talk to them, because businesses are much more open to hearing what their customers want than a cold call from someone that they haven't heard of. So one of the things I wanted to mention is we're really pleased at how over the years acceptance of the white poppy has really dramatically increased. And attitudes really are changing, and I think that's really important. And certainly initially, many people were very suspicious, and the kind of line of the Legion and a lot of the press was that it was kind of the white poppy against the red poppy, and that it was somehow a competition or a criticism. And I just wanted to say that Denis and I at Vancouver Peace Poppies have never seen it that way. We've really, I wear a red and white poppy. My father was a World War II vet and a strong supporter of the white poppy. But what I really feel is that rather than taking anything away from the traditional Remembrance Day, by refocusing it, what we're trying to do is really, in a way, the same thing that the Legion is doing, which is to keep it as an important and relevant day for Canadians to stop and think about the consequences of war. Many Canadians, and certainly many of the students in our school, are new Canadians. They don't have any links to uncles or fathers or grandfathers who fought in the major Canadian wars. But many of them have lived experience of war. Their families came here as refugees. They may have lost family members in wars. And again, we see that by broadening the focus of our Remembrance Day to consider all the victims everywhere, we really, really build a stronger Remembrance Day. And just to kind of keep that in mind in case anybody sort of goes to our website, we actually have on our website a link that says, oh, if you were looking for the red hot poppy, here's the site you should go to. And we have a section of tips on how not to lose those red poppies, which we know is also easy to do. And you'll have noticed that ours come with safety pins, all hand put on by us here. They don't come that way from Britain. But I don't know how they keep them on in Britain. In 15 years, I still haven't figured that out. But so anyway, I just wanted to say just a couple of other things, just to kind of give people a little bit of a sense of what we do. Vancouver Peace Poppies is really small. It's Denis and I and a few volunteers, normally more than in the last 2 years. We do a lot of mail orders. Wasn't our original idea, but we fill poppy orders all across Canada, and I answer all the emails individually. And actually, that's one of the greatest parts about the campaign is getting emails from all these people in all these different places saying how happy they are to have found the white poppy, to have found an alternative. And it really, having that personal connection with people rather than having an automated reply that says, send in your form and we'll mail you the poppies, has really made a big difference to me and really given me a sense of how many people there are all across the country that are working for peace. And we send a lot of poppies to big centers like Ottawa and Toronto particularly, and I'm really hoping that some of our online viewers will be interested in getting together some peace organization or organizations in Ontario that can take on the distribution in that area, because that would be a real load off for our small organization here. But one of the really exciting things to me isn't the number of poppies, but the number of places, and just the interesting places that we're sending poppies to. We're sending poppies to Coston, BC, to Cochrane, Alberta, Yorkton, Saskatchewan, Wascata down in the corner of Manitoba, Kapuskasing, Ontario, Fredericton, Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, Gillies Bay on Texada Island, Sangudo, Alberta, Tillingsburg, Ontario. It's just so exciting to think that people in all those places are spreading the word and are having a way to kind of bear witness in their community that there's more to Remembrance Day than just remembering soldiers. So I think that's plenty of, I should just say a little bit about this ceremony. So this ceremony, as Lara said, This is our 6th Let Peace Be Their Memorial ceremony. And the name of the ceremony and the wording on the banner comes from the banner that was made by the brave and wonderful veterans of VANA, Veterans Against Nuclear Arms, were just an inspiring group of men, most of them World War II vets, but also some Korean War vets, who worked so hard to show that peace was a better way than war, and marched unofficially, unwelcome, in the Remembrance Day parades at the end of the parade with their white berets and their hand-painted banner that said, "Let peace be their memorial." And we just wanted to carry that message forward, and just wanted to mention that Barb Coward of our music group, The Resistors, is the daughter of Woody Coward, who is one of the wonderful members of VANA. So now I'm going to introduce, enough talking for now, I'd like to introduce Fraser Union with their first song. Roger and Barry Truder are part of the performing group Fraser Union and have been supporters of our ceremony for several years. The combination of beautiful harmonies, skilled instrumentation, and a diverse repertoire of thoughtful and thought-provoking songs has made this group a local favorite for over 3 decades. Kathy Griffin, who joined them last year, couldn't make it this time, but we're delighted to have Barry and Roger with us again today.
Thank you, Teresa. You've heard how long Teresa and Denis have been working on the White Poppy campaign. And many of you, I know, have been in the struggle against the militarism that is destroying people's lives. And one of the things we need is something to keep us going. I mean, I go back to the Vietnam War era. Many of you probably do, and have seen a whole lot of other wars since that time. One of the ways that I think that people keep going is through music. And this is a song that was written by the late T.R. Ritchie for exactly that purpose. How do you keep going? It's called Somewhere to Begin. People say to me, "Gotta be crazy. How can you sing at a time like this? Don't you read the news? Don't you know the score? How can you sing when so many others grieve?" People say to me, "What kind of fool believes that a song can make a difference in the end?" Why, when they reply, I say, "A fool such as I, who sees a song as somewhere to begin." Song is somewhere to begin. The search for something worth believing in. If changes are to come, there's work that must be done, and the song is somewhere to begin. People say to me, "You gotta be crazy. How can you dream at a time like this? Don't you read the news? Don't you know the score? How can you dream when so many others grieve?" People say to me, "What kind of fool believes that a dream can make a difference in the end?" By when they reply, I somewhere to begin. Dream is somewhere to begin. The search for something worth believing in. If changes are to come, there's work that must be done, and a dream is somewhere to begin. People say to me, you gotta be crazy. How can you love at a time like this? Don't you read the news? Don't you know the score? How can you love when so many others grieve? People say to me, what kind of fool believes that love can make a difference in the end? By way of a reply, I say, fool such as I, who sees love is somewhere to begin. Love is somewhere to begin. The search for something worth believing in. If changes are to come, there's work that must be done, and love is somewhere to begin. And love is somewhere. Sing with us. Love is somewhere to begin. The search for something worth believing in. If changes are to come, there's work that must be done, and love is somewhere, and a dream is somewhere, and a song is somewhere to begin.
I was so thrilled with all the wonderful songs that the musicians put forward to sing at our ceremony today. And one of the reasons I was especially pleased was that so many of the songs are so hopeful and uplifting and inspiring, and that gave me a chance to go somewhere a little bit different with the poetry. So I decided that, given that part of the role of this ceremony is to both comfort the afflicted and, as they say, afflict the comfortable, I'm afraid that the next couple of poems I read are going to be more in that category. This first one particularly has some quite violent imagery, maybe disturbing for some people, but I think it's a very powerful and wonderful piece of writing. So it's the final section of The War Prayer, written by Mark Twain in 1904. This is the final section of Mark Twain's prose poem, The War Prayer, in which an unnamed country goes to war and patriotic citizens attend a church service for soldiers who have been called up. The people call upon God to grant them victory and protect their troops. Suddenly, an aged stranger appears, announcing that he is God's messenger. He explains to them that he is there to speak about the second part of their prayer for victory, its implicit consequences. The play ends with the stranger being dismissed as a senseless lunatic. Although it was written in 1904, it remained unpublished during Twain's lifetime because he feared the negative consequences for his family. The War Prayer. You have heard your servant's prayer, the uttered part of it. I am commissioned of God to put into words the other part of it, that part which the pastor, and also you in your hearts, fervently prayed silently, and ignorantly and unthinkingly. God grant it was so. You heard these words, grant us the victory, O Lord our God. That is sufficient. The whole of the utter prayer is compact into those pregnant words. Elaborations were not necessary. When you have prayed for victory, you have prayed many unmentioned results which follow victory, must follow it, cannot help but follow it. Upon the listening spirit of God the Father fell also the unspoken part of the prayer. He commandeth me to put it into words. O Lord, our Father, our young patriots, idols of our hearts, go forth to battle. Be thou near them. With them, in spirit, we also go forth from the sweet peace of our beloved firesides to smite the foe. O Lord, our God, help us to tear their soldiers to bloody shreds with our shells. Help us to cover their smiling fields with the pale forms of their patriot dead. Help us to drown the thunder of the guns with the shrieks of their wounded writhing in pain. Help us to lay waste their humble homes with a hurricane of fire. Help us to wring the hearts of their unoffending widows with unavailing grief. Help us to turn them out, roofless, with their little children, to wander unfriended the wastes of their desolate land, in rags and hunger and thirst, sports of the sun's flames of summer and the icy winds of winter, broken in spirit, worn with travail, imploring thee for the refuge of the grave, and denied it. For our sakes who adore thee, Lord, blast their hopes, blight their lives, protract their bitter pilgrimage, make heavy their steps, water their way with their tears, stain the white snow with the blood of their wounded feet. We ask it in the spirit of love, of him who is the source of love, and who is the ever-faithful refuge and friend of all that are sore beset and seek his aid with humble and contrite hearts. Amen. So that was a pretty powerful indictment of the way that religion is often commandeered in the support of war and nationalism. And the second poem that I'm going to read was written in 1916. It's called Sacrament, and it was written by Margaret Sackville. Born in 1881 into the peerage, Lady Margaret Sackville was a prolific writer and a principled and original thinker. In her 1916 collection, Pageant of War, she presented resolutely anti-war poetry much earlier than those who have come to be viewed as official poets of the disillusionment of World War I. A staunch Catholic, she references in this poem violent biblical images from the book of Revelations, but she calls for a merciful and loving God rather than a vengeful one. The sacramental bread and wine become, in this poem, not just the body and blood of Christ, but of all humanity. Sacrament. Before the altar of the world in flower, upon whose steps thy creatures kneel in line, we do beseech thee in this wild spring hour, grant us, O Lord, thy wine, but not this wine. Helpless we, praying by thy shimmering seas, beside thy fields whence all the world is fed, thy little children clinging about thy knees, cry, grant us, O Lord, thy bread, but not this bread, this wine of awful sacrifice outpoured, this bread of life, of human lives. The press is overflowing, the wine press of the Lord, yet doth he tread the foamings no less. These stricken lands, the green time of the year, has found them wasted by a purple flood, sodden and wasted everywhere, everywhere. Not all our tears may cleanse them from that blood. The earth is all too narrow for our dead, so many, and each a child of ours and thine. This flesh, our flesh, crumbled away like bread. This blood, our blood, poured out like wine. like wine. And now, I think that's enough afflicting for now. I would like to invite Roger and Barry to give us another song.
Thank you to the organizers of this event. It's a pretty wonderful thing to be a part of. Thank you all for being here, and also those of you via the radio waves. This song was written by peace activist, Irish peace activist, singer-songwriter Tommy Sands, and he wrote it in the time of the Troubles in Ireland. Feels like it's relevant, continues to be relevant. It's called Your Daughters and Your Sons, and it's for all daughters and sons. Please sing with us. That's right. Well, they wouldn't hear your music and they pulled your paintings down. They wouldn't read your writing and they banned you from the town. But they couldn't stop your dreaming and a victory you have won. You sown the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. You sown the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. Well, your weary smile, it proudly hides the chain marks on your hands as you bravely strive to realize the rights of everyone. And though your body's bent and bowed, a victory you have won. You sown the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. You sown the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. Well, I don't know your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone can work and children they can play. And though you never got your share of the fruits that you have won, you sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. Well, they taunted you in Belfast and they tortured you in Spain, and in that Warsaw ghetto, well, they tied you up in chains. In Chile and in Vietnam, when they came with tanks and guns, it's there you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. It's there you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. and now your music's playing, and the writing's on the wall, and all the dreams you've painted can be seen by one and all. And now you've got them thinking, and the future's just begun. You sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. You sowed the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.
As a fitting follow-up to this wonderful song, we actually have another taped segment of the program, a message from Malalai Joya in Afghanistan, who is a daughter in whom surely all the seeds mentioned in the previous song really took root and grew, and she's trying to do that for other women in Afghanistan. In 2005, at age 27, Malalai Joya became the youngest woman elected to the Parliament of Afghanistan. She served until 2007, when she was dismissed for publicly denouncing the presence of warlords and war criminals in the Afghan parliament. In 2010, Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Her memoir, A Woman Among Warlords, has been published in over a dozen languages, and she is the subject of the award-winning documentary, Enemies of Happiness, which is available for free viewing through the Vancouver Public Library's Canopy streaming service. Born in 1978, Malalai was raised in refugee camps and has never known a time when her homeland was not ravaged by war. A fierce critic of the Taliban, the warlords, and other fundamentalists in Afghanistan, she has survived numerous assassination attempts and is now forced to continue her work underground. She couldn't be here in person, but has made this short video to share with us.
Hello to everyone. Thanks for giving me opportunity to deliver my message on behalf of the oppressed people of Afghanistan, especially the women of my country. Thank you to the White Puppies group and to the Vancouver Unitarians for holding this special ceremony on November 11 to honor all victims of war. Remembrance Day should be a day for remembering all the victims of war, not for glorifying war or the governments of the invading countries. War have killed so many of my people, and those who have survived suffer the mental anguish and insecurity that comes with the loss of loved ones and the destruction of our country. It has now been more than 40 years that the people of Afghanistan have been paying a heavy cost and suffering from the horrific wars which have been imposed by big empires for their own strategic interests and nefarious goals. The root cause of all these disasters, which has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of people and countless women's rights and human rights violations, insecurity, poverty, and unemployment, and deprivation of education, are the policies of domination by imperialist powers and warmongering governments. There is no doubt that people of Afghanistan, like any other wartime country, are thirsty for freedom, peace, and social justice. But how can we expect peace, freedom, and human rights when our country is the center of proxy wars of the big powers and neighboring countries, and is in the grip of the terrorist fundamentalists in power? Looking back over the past 20 years, the US and NATO has committed different kind of atrocities to our defenseless Afghan people. And now they betrayed us, leaving Afghanistan to the Taliban through a shameful deal helped by the puppet regime of Ashraf Ghani, who fled the country with his piles of cash. The same treason was done 20 years ago in Afghanistan after 9/11. The US replaced the barbaric regime of Taliban with fundamentalist warlords and some Western technocrats. The many thousands of Western soldiers who died in Afghanistan were killed for these selfish interests. The tragic history of Afghanistan is being repeated. This brutal war is far from over because a sinister dealing with a savage group armed and supported by foreign intelligence agencies will never bring peace. And peace without justice is meaningless. Looking back to the history, the US regime has committed war crimes, and they did so even in their last operation in Afghanistan by shooting into the crowds waiting at the airport, killing and wounding more than 40 Afghans and several other desperate people who fell from the military plane. They launched rockets from the airport towards residential areas in the name of targeting ISIS, and as a result, killed 9 innocent Afghans, including women and children. The rise and now the return of the Taliban and the ideological brothers of these extremists such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and dozens of other terrorist organizations in Afghanistan are the result of decades of foreign intervention and corruption, which has turned the hope of life and a relatively bright future into a terrible nightmare for our helpless compatriots. The catastrophe has caused many men and women to be unemployed, and at the same time, inflation has risen, which lead to extreme poverty. It is heartbreaking to see that some families have even had to sell their beloved children or their own kidneys or commit suicide because they could not feed their children. Dear friends, I have repeatedly emphasized that the only way to save Afghanistan, to get rid of this catastrophic situation, is solidarity of the progressive, democratic, and secular forces. That's why I'm so thankful to be part of your event today. Together we must join hands and rebuild a powerful anti-war movement, a powerful global women's movement, and a powerful global movement for justice. Afghans are a courageous and determined people, and even in these dark hours for our country, we will find new ways to unite and fight for our liberation. International solidarity and support are crucial at this time. Do not forget the suffering people of Afghanistan just because the US and other NATO troops have gone home. We are more determined than ever to come together to make sure that one day we have an independent Afghanistan where people can live in a peaceful society. Please lay a wreath today for the people and the women of Afghanistan. Thank you for listening to my message.
cause and change the world for the better. Peace is a good place to start. Here are Barb Coward, Janet Hall, Dee Whalen, and Janet Dempsey, the Ree sisters.
Thank you. It's a real honor for us to be able to sing here today. The first song we're singing was written by Pat Humphreys, who's half of the duo Emma's Revolution. In the culture of her Cherokee ancestors, it was the women who chose the leaders, and it was the women who decided if their nation would go to war.
Women say no to war. Women have borne the child. Out of our bodies comes each new life. We will not stand to see our sons and daughters bleed, drawn to a flame, not in our name. Women say no. Women say no. If we survive the wars, we are left holding on, healing the wounded ones, mourning the dead, finding a place to sleep, water and food to eat, calming the fears, so many tears. Women say no. Are you wailing, grieving, shaken to your core? Are you willing? Start now, put an end to war. Women say yes to love. We know the strength of peace. We have been practicing all of our lives. Voices of hope resound all of the world around. Life is worth more, and to the war, women say no. Life is worth more, and to the war, women say no.
In 2020, the American songwriter Eliza Gilkyson put out a new album called 2020. And in it, she wanted to develop a sort of intentional unity, she said, of people looking out for one another and for the earth. And she said the main thing was to keep this firm intention, but with peace in our hearts. So not full of anger and not full of remorse, but with peace. So this is called Peace in Our Hearts. And you might want to sing along. You'll figure out where the part is to sing along.
We're gonna walk together, arm in arm, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna walk together, arm in arm, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna walk together, arm in arm, so our sisters and our brothers don't come to any harm. We know we got peace in our hearts. We're gonna walk with every color and tribe, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna walk with every color and tribe, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna walk with every color and tribe, 'cause we're stronger together when we're on the same side. We know we got peace in our hearts. We're gonna stand for the the earth and the children too, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna stand for the earth and the children too, with peace in our hearts. We're gonna stand for the earth and the children too. It'll take everyone to make this dream come true. We know we got peace in our hearts. We're gonna stare into the face of the hateful mind with peace in our hearts. We're gonna stare into the face of a hateful mind with peace in our hearts. We're gonna stare into the face of a hateful mind. All we gotta do is let our love light shine. We know we got peace. We know we got peace. We know we got peace in our hearts.
Thank you.
Our next poem is appropriately by a woman. Warsan Shiree is a Kenyan-born Somali-British writer, poet, editor, and teacher. Shiree was born in 1988 in Kenya to Somali parents and immigrated to the United Kingdom at the age of 1. She has published 2 books of poetry and teaches poetry workshops globally and online for both cathartic and aesthetic purposes. This powerful poem was inspired by conversations Warsan had with refugees at a deportation center in Britain and has been called a rallying call for refugees and their advocates. Like Mark Twain's war prayer, this poem contains violent and disturbing images that may be triggering for some people. Home is the barrel of a gun. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats, and the boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly, and even then, you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you would not be going back. You have to understand that no one would put their children in a boat unless the sea is safer than the land. No one burns their palms under trains, beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck, feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled mean more than the journey. No one crawls under fences, wants to be beaten, wants to be pitied. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches where your body is left aching, or prison, because prison is safer than a city of fire, and one prison guard in the night is safer than 14 men who look like your father. No one could take it, could stomach it. No one's skin would be tough enough. But go home, blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers sucking our country dry. Niggers with their hands out, they smell strange, savage, messed up their own country, and now they want to mess up ours. How do the words, dirty looks, roll off your back? Maybe it's because the blow is softer than a limb torn off, or the words are more tender than 14 men between your legs, or that insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child's body in pieces. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the desert, wade through the ocean, drown, save, be hungry, beg, forget pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave, run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here. We will now have a video performance with 2 more songs chosen and recorded by Linda Allen for today's ceremony. Following that, Nan Gregory will take the podium as MC for the wreath-laying ceremony and reader for our final poetry selections.
There are also those victims, the men, the women, the children, who try to escape the violence, the war in their homelands. And they come to the border, in the U.S., to the southern border, and they come with the promise, a promise that I believed in too, that they would find safety, they would find refuge, they could find a home in this new land. And what we have learned is that the people who are coming, trying to escape these wars, wound up on our border and were faced with cages. This is a song I wrote about that. It's called Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? My beautiful daughter, my dear daughter, where are you? They say run, hija, run, run for the border. They've taken your husband, your son, and your father. Our lives were in danger, so we ran for the border, me and my daughter, to live among strangers. Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? The journey was long and we barely survived it. Half starved and exhausted, we finally arrived to the country of refuge for strong, willing hands. It was there at the border the rumors began. Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? We were finally questioned. Then they reached for my daughter. I heard rumors of cages, kids taken from mothers. I screamed, run, hija, run. Our lives were in danger, but they took her from me, these cold as ice strangers. Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? They sent me away from that border. I go back every day to search for my daughter, but they've taken our children to live among strangers, but they can't tell me where. They've lost all the papers. Mi querida hija, ¿dónde estás? 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 I have one more song for you, and this is a song of holding the vision, because truly that is up to you, that is up to me, that is up to us to acknowledge, to remember each other who work for peace, each of those who have been victims. We must acknowledge, we must remember. So this is a song of hope. I believe that peace will come. 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 I believe that hope survives. 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 I believe that love will rise. 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 I believe in humankind. I believe in humankind. I believe in humankind. I believe in humankind. I believe that peace will come. 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 I believe that peace will come.
In our usual outdoor wreath ceremony, we will be placing 11 universal wreaths, as well as community wreaths commemorating victims of specific wars, past and present. We are constrained for space here, so today's modified program will feature a reduced set of 8 universal wreaths. These handcrafted wreaths were custom designed to recognize often overlooked victims of war, those groups whose suffering recurs across conflicts, continents, and centuries. Come on up, boys. Our first wreath was made by local elementary school students who lent their hands to make the background circle of green handprints to commemorate children who are killed, injured, or orphaned by war. In addition to those physical losses, we mourn the lost potential of an estimated 50 million children whose education is currently disrupted by war. Some of the luckier ones end up in our local schools, but others spend their entire youth in refugee camps with no access to formal education or are forced to abandon their schooling to help support desperate families. Laying it today are Gabriel and Camilo O'Keefe. Thank you so much. Our next wreath is for Indigenous victims of genocide and cultural destruction. From first contact to present day, Indigenous peoples worldwide have been victims of both overt and covert wars on their cultures and existence. Our wreath of local red cedar is symbolically wound with invasive English ivy, a plant infamous for supplanting and killing native vegetation. On the attached leaves are some of the brutal tactics Indigenous people have suffered and continue to suffer here in Canada and across the globe. Population transfer, dispossession, reservations, sterilization, forced assimilation, religious prohibitions, rewritten histories, language bans, negative propaganda, sexual and other abuse. These are just some of the weapons used in this brutal ongoing war. We're grateful to have Michelle Marcus laying this wreath for us today. Thank you, Michelle. The next wreath represents refugees fleeing conflict, the largest group of civilian war victims and the one most in the news these days. The UNHCR currently estimates there are 79.5 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, of whom 26 million are refugees. We Canadians pride ourselves on our generosity, but in fact, 73% of refugees are hosted in neighboring countries. Turkey alone hosts 3.6 million refugees. Canada and other destination countries gain from the skills and diversity refugees bring, but their homelands suffer a corresponding loss. This wreath is laid by Megumi Anderson. Thank you, Megumi. This oil-soaked wreath represents the environmental devastation caused by war. Military land use needs for bases, training, storage, etc., often displace people from their lands and homes. Military activity uses solvents, fuels, and other toxic chemicals which leach toxins into the environment that remain there for decades and even centuries. The huge military bootprint is a major contributor to global warming, and one we should remember when discussing local pipeline and tanker issues. Denis Leplan is our wreath layer. Thank you, Denis. The next wreath recognizes the strength and commitment of conscientious objectors and war resistors, as well as the persecution they often face. While some countries allow for alternate civilian service, in others, those who have dared to oppose war still face imprisonment, exile, or even death for refusing to fight. Whether motivated by religious faith, secular moral values, or a practical belief that war is wasteful and ineffective, we honor their efforts and their memory. We're pleased to have Yvonne Marcus laying this wreath. Thank you, Yvonne. The red and white poppy buds on this wreath symbolize the precarious position of child soldiers. While we may visualize small boys clutching guns, up to 40% of child soldiers are girls. Tens of thousands of children are estimated to be recruited and used by armed groups as fighters, informants, looters, messengers, spies, and domestic or sexual slaves. Neither civilian nor military, their childhoods are cut short, and even those who escape suffer lasting harm from the violence they have seen. Our wreath layer is Hanno Pinder. Thank you, Hanno. The next wreath is dedicated to women raped and victimized in wartime. Do you want to come and stand on the little green thing? Yeah. Women raped and victimized in wartime, a crime as old and terrible as war itself. Its symbols recognize both women's strength and their vulnerability. Conflict zones and refugee camps can be especially dangerous for women who may be assaulted or pressured to trade sexual services for food, safe passage, or other necessities. Here to lay our wreath today is Leslie Kemp. Thank you, Leslie. Our last universal wreath, with its colorful doves, is labeled for peace, because in addition to mourning what has been lost to war, we are also here to show our commitment to work for peace. This includes opposing Canadian arms exports and pressuring our governments to promote and fund effective non-military means of dispute resolution. This final hopeful wreath is dedicated to all peace builders, past, present, and future. It's being laid by Cecilia Gruber. Thank you, Cecilia. Now please welcome back Jim Edmondson and Madeline DeLittle for another wonderful song.
There's so much to reflect on, isn't there? I want you to imagine that you're up in space and you're looking down at this amazing planet, and you're thinking to yourself, what are they doing down there?
What are they doing to the planet? And what are they doing to each other? This song is called From Way Up Here. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball of rock and sea and sand, no bigger than my hand. From way up here, the earth looks very small. They shouldn't fight at all down there upon that little sphere. Their time is short, a life is just a day. You think they'd find a way, you think they'd get along and fill their magic days with song. La 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 la. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball, so small, so beautiful and clear. Their time is short, a life is just a day. Must be a better way to use the time that runs among the distant suns. La 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 la. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball, so small, so beautiful and dear.
Well, that was sure lovely. Thank you so much. I have a couple of poems for you, and the first one is by Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Zen master, poet, scholar, and human rights activist. He spent 40 years in exile, banished by Vietnam in 1966 for his tireless anti-war activism. In 1967, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the late Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He challenges all of us with his belief that we cannot expect a peaceful world unless we have peace within our own hearts. The poem is called Please Call Me by My True Names. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow. Even today I'm still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. Are we okay out here? Oh my goodness. Are we good? Oh, yay. If only everything were that easy. Thank you so much for stepping up. Okay, I'm going to start this poem again because it's okay, please call me by my true names. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow. Even today, I'm still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I'm arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am a mayflower metamorphosing on the surface of a river, and I am a bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people and dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. So please call me by my true name so I can hear my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up and the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. And the last poem of the day, well, I can't say it's the last poem, I don't know, Reveler, or what you've got in store, but so my second poem is by Robert Priest, who's a Toronto poet, playwright, songwriter, and novelist. He's written 10 books of poetry, 2 children's novels, 3 children's albums, and 4 CDs of songs and poems. His powerful anti-war song, 10 Civilians, is featured on the Peace Poppies website. This poem is called Go Gather Up the Love. Go gather up the love. I know what we must do. It's in your eyes and my eyes. Go gather it up, look by look, gaze by gaze. 1 flame in a hand, 1 holy flame, 2 flames gathered up. Gather up the love in our children. Gather it through slum and hovel, through mansion and factory. With great gentleness, go, taking a spark here, a glow there, turning down none of it. Gather it up and free it, even if just in your own lips, through your own heart, by being strong, by always going beyond your limits. Gather it to saturation long past your center, deeper than the full depth of you. Gather it up in beads, in blue flames, in fierce bonfires. Let there be a leap of love in the center of the earth, a flame higher than the heavens, a leap of our commitment, of our will, a leap of fire straight into the stars. And now, here's our beloved Reverend Laura, who will give us our closing remarks.
Thank you, Nan. One of my favorite storytellers. Indeed, we have a lot to reflect on today. I'm very grateful to the organizers of this event, Teresa Gagne and Lynn Armstrong and Denis Laplante, for your tireless work and hope that this is going to make a change in our world. And I believe it's true. Gratitude to our musicians, both in person and online, and to all of you joining us online as well as those who have come into our sanctuary. And to our stellar technical crew and facilities people. We couldn't do any of this without your dedication and skill. Thank you up there. So thank you to our readers as well, and to all of you who have opened your ears and your hearts to listen to these messages and to feel them with compassion. We will carry this message of peace out into the world. I have a closing reading from Kathleen McTeague. This is a house of peace. Breathe in a grateful breath that you sit here this moment of your life safely and in silence. There is a war raging far from this place of comfort. We know it is there. We know our siblings suffer its poisonous touch. Our hearts are weighted with what we cannot resolve. So here we lift a banner in our own souls and remember that in this place, in this moment, we are not at war. Breathe in the truth of this moment. Here is our strength, our deep well of courage. Breathing in, we rest our spirits. Breathing out, we pray for peace. May those in harm's way be safe for another day. May those who drive the engines of power be awakened by compassion. May we all hold the cup filled with courage and with the will that has been carried by peacemakers in long ages before us. May we drink of it deeply and be steadfast in the ways of peace. May it be so. To close our ceremony today, Madeline and Jim will sing for us again a song of peace in a very familiar tune, Finlandia.
is a song for people of all nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. Here is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as fine and true as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. So here's my song for people of all nations, a song of peace for your land and for mine.
Thank you. This concludes our program for today, but I invite all of you to come forward, if you will, and spend some time with these wreaths. Take pictures of them, share them on your social media, and for those of you online, perhaps we can zoom in a little bit and you can see them more closely. And thank you all of you for being here today.